The Bible is more than a collection of ancient writings. It's the greatest story ever told, spanning creation, fall, redemption, and the ultimate restoration of all things. From the opening words of Genesis to the glorious finale of Revelation, each chapter weaves a tapestry of God's love, grace, and purpose for humanity. In this series, we journey through the foundational stories of Scripture: the formation of the world, the covenant with Abraham, the exodus of God's people, the wisdom of the prophets, the birth and mission of Jesus Christ, and the hope of eternal life. These timeless narratives reveal who God is, who we are, and the profound relationship between Creator and creation. Together, we'll uncover the threads that connect every story into one seamless masterpiece, the story of God's plan to rescue and renew the world. Let's step into the pages of history, faith, and hope, and discover how these ancient truths still speak powerfully today.
What if I told you that a single conversation changed the course of human history? Imagine a world where one man's decision to follow the unseen voice of God set in motion events that would shape the beliefs of millions. After the people dispersed from Babel, idolatry became routine and commonplace throughout most of the world, but one man, Abram, the son of Terah, steadfastly adhered to the worship of the one true God. Picture this: a 75-year-old man named Abram living in the ancient city of Haran. He's comfortable, settled, surrounded by family. But then, out of the blue, he hears a voice. Not just any voice, but the voice of God. And what God says is nothing short of extraordinary. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Now, let's pause for a moment. Imagine packing up your entire life, leaving behind everything familiar to follow a promise from God. Abraham must be separated from the associations of his early life. The influence of kindred and friends would interfere with the training which the Lord purposed to give his servant. But here's where it gets really interesting. God doesn't just tell Abram to leave. He makes some pretty big promises. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Now, Abram isn't young. At 75, he's well past retirement age in our terms. He and his wife Sarai don't have any children. So when God promises to make him into a great nation, it's not just unlikely, it seems downright impossible. But that's the thing about faith. It often flies in the face of what seems logical or possible. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. Abraham's unquestioning obedience is one of the most striking evidences of faith to be found in all the Bible. To him, faith was the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So what does Abram do? He packs up and goes. He takes his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions. They set out for Canaan, a land Abram has never seen. It's a journey of about 400 miles, no small feat in ancient times. We're talking weeks, maybe months of travel. Many are still tested, as was Abraham. They do not hear the voice of God speaking directly from the heavens, but he calls them by the teachings of his word and the events of his providence. They may be required to abandon a career that promises wealth and honor, to leave congenial and profitable associations and separate from kindred, to enter upon what appears to be only a path of self-denial, hardship, and sacrifice. The place where they first tarried was Shechem, under the shade of the oaks of Moreh, in a wide grassy valley, with its olive groves and gushing springs between Mount Ebal on the one side and Mount Gerizim on the other. Abraham made his encampment. It was a fair and goodly country that the patriarch had entered, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and depths that spring out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of oil olive and honey. But to the worshipper of Jehovah, a heavy shadow rested upon wooded hill and fruitful plain. The Canaanite was then in the land, Abraham had reached the goal of his hopes to find a country occupied by an alien race and overspread with idolatry. In the groves were set up the altars of false gods, and human sacrifices were offered upon the neighboring heights. While he clung to the divine promise, it was not without distressful forebodings that he pitched his tent. When they finally reach Canaan, God appears to Abram again. "To your offspring I will give this land," he says. Now, remember, Abram is childless. He's standing in a foreign land, surrounded by other peoples and cultures, and yet God is promising this land to his descendants. Abram's response? He builds an altar near Bethel to the Lord. It's a powerful symbol of his faith and gratitude. He's marking this promise, this moment, in a tangible way. Abraham, the friend of God, set us a worthy example. His was a life of prayer. Wherever he pitched his tent, close beside it was set up his altar. God leads his children by a way that they know not, but he does not forget or cast off those who put their trust in him. He permitted affliction to come upon Job, but he did not forsake him. God has always tried his people in the furnace of affliction. It is in the heat of the furnace that the dross is separated from the true gold of the Christian character. During his stay in Egypt, Abraham gave evidence that he was not free from human weakness and imperfection. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. There's a severe famine in the land. Suddenly, this promised land doesn't seem so promising. Abram, faced with the threat of starvation, makes a decision. He heads to Egypt. Now, this is where things get a bit complicated. As they're about to enter Egypt, Abram turns to his wife, Sarai. He says, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will kill me and let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." Let's unpack this for a moment. Abram, the man chosen by God, the one who's just shown incredible faith, is now lying and potentially putting his wife in danger. It's a stark reminder that even people we consider heroes of faith were flawed, complex human beings. As Abram predicted, Pharaoh's officials see Sarai and praise her to Pharaoh. She's taken into his palace. Abram, believed to be her brother, is treated well, but there's a price for this deception. God sends serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai. He had ignorantly been about to do him a serious injury, but God had interposed and saved the monarch from committing so great a sin. He summons Abram and confronts him. "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister,' so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." It's a tense moment. Pharaoh, despite being the wronged party, doesn't punish Abram. Instead, he sends him away with his wife and everything he owns. It's an unexpected show of mercy, perhaps influenced by the divine plagues. So, what do we make of all this? Genesis 12 is a chapter of contrasts. We see great faith and human weakness, divine promises and human scheming. It's a reminder that the story of faith isn't about perfect people, but about a perfect God working through imperfect individuals. The chapter ends with Abram leaving Egypt, very wealthy in livestock, silver, and gold. He returns to the Negev, back to where he had first built an altar. It's a return to the place of promise, a reset after the detour in Egypt. But the story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of Abram's journey, a journey that will see his name changed to Abraham, will finally bring him the promised son, and will indeed make him the father of many nations. The warning that had been given to Pharaoh proved a protection to Abraham in his after-intercourse with heathen peoples, for the matter could not be kept secret, and it was seen that the God whom Abraham worshipped would protect his servant, and that any injury done him would be avenged. Our story continues with Abraham, then known as Abram, returning to Canaan from Egypt. He's not alone. His nephew Lot is with him, and both have accumulated considerable wealth. But as their flocks and herds grow, so does the tension between their herdsmen. The land simply can't support both families living so close together. Abraham returned to Canaan, very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. Lot was still with him, and again they came to Bethel, and pitched their tents by the altar which they had before erected. Here, the noble, unselfish spirit of Abraham was displayed. How many under similar circumstances would, at all hazards, cling to their individual rights and preferences? How many households have thus been rent asunder? How many churches have been divided, making the cause of truth a byword and a reproach among the wicked? The children of God, the world over, are one family, and the same spirit of love and conciliation should govern them. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love. In honor preferring one another is the teaching of our Saviour. Let there be no strife between me and thee, said Abraham, for we be brethren, not only by natural relationship, but as worshippers of the true God. Abram, ever the peacemaker, proposes a solution. He gives Lot first choice of the land, demonstrating a remarkable level of generosity and trust in God's promise. Lot, seizing the opportunity, chooses the lush, well-watered plains of Jordan. Although Lot owed his prosperity to his connection with Abraham, he manifested no gratitude to his benefactor. Courtesy would have dictated that he yield the choice to Abraham, but instead of this, he selfishly endeavored to grasp all its advantages. He lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. The most fertile region in all Palestine was the Jordan Valley, reminding the beholders of the lost paradise and equaling the beauty and productiveness of the Nile-enriched plains they had so lately left. There were cities also, wealthy and beautiful, inviting to profitable traffic in their crowded marts. Dazzled with visions of worldly gain, Lot overlooked the moral and spiritual evils that would be encountered there. After Lot's departure, God speaks to Abram, reaffirming his promise. He tells Abram to look in all directions, north, south, east, and west, because all the land he sees will belong to his descendants forever. What's more, God promises that Abram's offspring will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. Imagine that, a childless man in his 70s being promised countless descendants. Abraham was honored by the surrounding nations as a mighty prince and a wise and able chief. He did not shut away his influence from his neighbors. His life and character, in their marked contrast with those of the worshippers of idols, exerted a telling influence in favor of the true faith. The people of God are his representatives upon the earth, and he intends that they shall be lights in the moral darkness of this world. Scattered all over the country, in the towns, cities, and villages, they are God's witnesses, the channels through which he will communicate to an unbelieving world the knowledge of his will and the wonders of his grace. Rich in faith, noble in generosity, unfaltering in obedience, and humble in the simplicity of his pilgrim life, Abraham was also wise in diplomacy and brave and skillful in war. But life isn't all smooth sailing for Abram. Chapter 14 throws us into the midst of a regional war. 4 kings from the east, led by Kedorlaomer of Elam, are battling against 5 kings from the region of Sodom and Gomorrah. The eastern kings emerge victorious. The victors plundered the cities of the plain and departed with rich spoil and many captives, among whom were Lot and his family. When Abram hears of his nephew's capture, he springs into action. He musters 318 trained men from his household and pursues the invaders. Flushed with victory and having no fear of an assault from their vanquished foes, they had given themselves up to reveling. The patriarch divided his force so as to approach from different directions and came upon the encampment by night. His attack, so vigorous and unexpected, resulted in speedy victory. The king of Elam was slain, and his panic-stricken forces were utterly routed. Lot and his family, with all the prisoners and their goods, were recovered, and a rich booty fell into the hands of the victors. To Abraham, under God, the triumph was due. On his return, the king of Sodom came out with his retinue to honor the conqueror. He bade him take the goods, begging only that the prisoners should be restored. By the usage of war, the spoils belonged to the conquerors. But Abraham had undertaken this expedition with no purpose of gain, and he refused to take advantage of the unfortunate, only stipulating that his confederates should receive the portion to which they were entitled. Few, if subjected to such a test, would have shown themselves as noble as did Abraham. Few would have resisted the temptation to secure so rich a booty. His example is a rebuke to self-seeking, mercenary spirits. Abraham regarded the claims of justice and humanity. His conduct illustrates the inspired maxim, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." "I have lifted up my hand," he said, "unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." After the battle, we witness two significant encounters. First, Melchizedek, the king of Salem and priest of the Most High God, blesses Abram. He gives them bread and wine for his army, and Abram, recognizing Melchizedek's spiritual authority, gives him a tenth of everything. One day, in the hot summer noontide, the patriarch was sitting in his tent door, looking out over the quiet landscape, when he saw in the distance 3 travelers approaching. Before reaching his tent, the strangers halted, as if consulting as to their course. Without waiting for them to solicit favors, Abraham rose quickly, and as they were apparently turning in another direction, he hastened after them, and with the utmost courtesy urged them to honor him by tarrying for refreshment. With his own hands, he brought water that they might wash the dust of travel from their feet. He himself selected their food, and while they were at rest under the cooling shade, an entertainment was made ready, and he stood respectfully beside them while they partook of his hospitality. This act of courtesy God regarded of sufficient importance to record in his word, and 1,000 years later it was referred to by an inspired apostle. "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." Abraham had seen in his guests only 3 tired wayfarers, little thinking that among them was one whom he might worship without sin. But the true character of the heavenly messengers was now revealed. Though they were on their way as ministers of wrath, yet to Abraham, the man of faith, they spoke first of blessings. God is strict to mark iniquity and to punish transgression. He takes no delight in vengeance. Abraham had honored God, and the Lord honored him, taking him into his counsels and revealing to him his purposes. "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do?" said the Lord. "The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous." God intended to destroy Sodom, and shortly 2 of the heavenly messengers departed, leaving Abraham alone with him whom he now knew to be the Son of God. And the man of faith pleaded for the inhabitants of Sodom. Once he had saved them by his sword, now he endeavored to save them by prayer. With deep reverence and humility, he urged his plea, "I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes." There was no self-confidence, no boasting of his own righteousness. He did not claim favor on the ground of his obedience or of the sacrifices he had made in doing God's will. Himself a sinner, he pleaded in the sinner's behalf. Such a spirit all who approach God should possess. Yet Abraham manifested the confidence of a child pleading with a loved father. He came close to the heavenly messenger and fervently urged his petition. Lot dwelt in Sodom, but did not partake of the wickedness in that doomed city. And because of this, Abraham pressed his request to God, asking him as to why he would destroy the righteous with the wicked. And finally God replied, "If there are 10 righteous in the city, I will not destroy it." Ultimately, the Lord could not find 10 righteous persons in the city, and the angels went into the city and rescued 2 of Lot's daughters and Lot's wife, who, being told by the heavenly messengers not to look back towards the city, turned and looked back and immediately became a pillar of salt. It does not pay to hesitate when God asks us to do something. Had Lot immediately left Sodom, his wife would have been spared. Despite his recent victory, Abraham's afraid. God comes to him in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram voices his deepest concern. He still has no children. How can God's promises come true if he remains childless? God's response is reassuring. He takes Abram outside and tells him to look at the stars. "Count them if you can," God says. "So shall your offspring be." The Bible then tells us something crucial. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. "And he said unto him, Take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and, lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And it came to pass that, when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace, and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces, consumed the entire offering. And God said to Abram, Unto thy seed have I given this land." Abraham, now 100 years old, and his wife Sarah, 90, welcomed their son Isaac into the world. Can you imagine the joy, the laughter echoing through their tent? This wasn't just any birth, it was the fulfillment of a divine promise made years ago. But not everyone was celebrating. Sarah's eyes narrow as she watches Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn son, with the servant Hagar, playing with young Isaac. Jealousy and fear take root in her heart. "Send them away," she demands of Abraham. "That woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham is torn. Ishmael is his son too, after all. Now he was suddenly set aside, and in their disappointment, mother and son hated the child of Sarah. The general rejoicing increased their jealousy, until Ishmael dared openly to mock the heir of God's promise. Sarah saw in Ishmael's turbulent disposition a perpetual source of discord, and she appealed to Abraham, urging that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away from the encampment. The patriarch was thrown into great distress. How could he banish Ishmael, his son, still dearly beloved? In his perplexity, he pleaded for divine guidance. The Lord, through a holy angel, directed him to grant Sarah's desire. His love for Ishmael or Hagar ought not to stand in the way, for only thus could he restore harmony and happiness to his family. And the angel gave him the consoling promise that though separated from his father's home, Ishmael should not be forsaken by God. His life should be preserved, and he should become the father of a great nation. Abraham obeyed the angel's word, but it was not without keen suffering. The instruction given to Abraham touching the sacredness of the marriage relation was to be a lesson for all ages. It declares that the rights and happiness of this relation are to be carefully guarded, even at a great sacrifice. Sarah was the only true wife of Abraham. Her rights as a wife and mother, no other person was entitled to share. She reverenced her husband, and in this she is presented in the New Testament as a worthy example. Meanwhile, Abraham's reputation grows. He makes a treaty with Abimelech, the king of Gerar, securing rights to a well he had dug. This might seem like a small detail, but it shows Abraham establishing himself in this new land God had promised him. God had called Abraham to be the father of the faithful, and his life was to stand as an example of faith to succeeding generations. But his faith had not been perfect. He had shown distrust of God in concealing the fact that Sarah was his wife, and again in his marriage with Hagar. That he might reach the highest standard, God subjected him to another test. God throws Abraham the ultimate curveball. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Can you imagine the shock, the anguish Abraham must have felt? The very son God had promised him, now to be sacrificed? At the time of receiving this command, Abraham had reached the age of 120 years. Satan was at hand to suggest that he must be deceived, for the divine law commands, "Thou shalt not kill," and God would not require what he had once forbidden. Going outside his tent, Abraham looked up to the calm brightness of the unclouded heavens and recalled the promise made nearly 50 years before, that his seed should be innumerable as the stars. If this promise was to be fulfilled through Isaac, how could he be put to death? Abraham was tempted to believe that he might be under a delusion. In his doubt and anguish, he bowed upon the earth and prayed, as he had never prayed before, for some confirmation of the command if he must perform this terrible duty. He remembered the angels sent to reveal to him God's purpose to destroy Sodom, and who bore to him the promise of this same son Isaac. And he went to the place where he had several times met the heavenly messengers, hoping to meet them again and receive some further direction. But none came to his relief. Darkness seemed to shut him in, but the command of God was sounding in his ears. "Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest." That command must be obeyed, and he dared not delay. He sets out with Isaac, wood, fire, and a knife. As they climb the mountain, Isaac innocently asks, "Father, where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham's heart must have been breaking as he replied, "God himself will provide the lamb, my son." Even now he did not murmur against God, but strengthened his soul by dwelling upon the evidences of the Lord's goodness and faithfulness. This son had been unexpectedly given, and had not he who bestowed the precious gift a right to recall his own? Then faith repeated the promise, "In Isaac shall thy seed be called, a seed numberless as the grains of sand upon the shore." He also entertained the thought that God would perhaps raise him from the dead. At the appointed place, they built the altar and laid the wood upon it. Then, with trembling voice, Abraham unfolded to his son the divine message. It was with terror and amazement that Isaac learned his fate, but he offered no resistance. He could have escaped his doom had he chosen to do so. The grief-stricken old man, exhausted with the struggle of those 3 terrible days, could not have opposed the will of the vigorous youth. But Isaac had been trained from childhood to ready, trusting obedience, and as the purpose of God was opened before him, he yielded a willing submission. At the last moment, as Abraham raises the knife, an angel stops him. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," the angel says. "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looks up and sees a ram caught in a thicket. He sacrifices the ram instead, naming the place, "The Lord will provide." God renews his covenant, saying, "I will surely bless you, and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore." Abraham's great act of faith stands like a pillar of light, illuminating the pathway of God's servants in all succeeding ages. Abraham did not seek to excuse himself from doing the will of God. During that 3 days' journey, he had sufficient time to reason and to doubt God if he was disposed to doubt. He might have reasoned that the slaying of his son would cause him to be looked upon as a murderer, but he did not make any excuses. Abraham was human. His passions and attachments were like ours. But he did not stop to question how the promise could be fulfilled if Isaac should be slain. He knew that God is just and righteous in all his requirements. Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Abraham's beloved wife and partner, through all these adventures, dies at the age of 127. Abraham mourns deeply and negotiates to buy a cave in Machpelah as a burial site. It's a touching moment of grief, but also one that shows Abraham putting down roots in this promised land. Through type and promise, God preached before the gospel unto Abraham. Galatians 3:8. And the patriarch's faith was fixed upon the Redeemer to come. Said Christ to the Jews, "Your father Abraham rejoiced that he should see my day, and he saw it and was glad." The sacrifice required of Abraham was not alone for his own good, nor solely for the benefit of succeeding generations, but it was also for the instruction of the sinless intelligences of heaven and of other worlds. The field of the controversy between Christ and Satan, The field on which the plan of redemption is wrought out is the lesson book of the universe. Because Abraham had shown a lack of faith in God's promises, Satan had accused him before the angels and before God of having failed to comply with the conditions of the covenant. Heaven beheld with wonder and admiration Abraham's unfaltering obedience. All heaven applauded his fidelity. Satan's accusations were shown to be false. As Abraham ages, he turns his attention to the future of his lineage. He sends his most trusted servant back to his homeland to find a wife for Isaac. The servant prays for guidance and meets Rebekah at a well. Her kindness in offering water, not just to him but also to his camels, convinces the servant that she's the one. Rebekah agrees to go back with him and becomes Isaac's wife. In his final years, Abraham remarries. His new wife, Keturah, bears him 6 more sons. But Isaac remains his heir, receiving all of Abraham's wealth. Abraham lives to the ripe old age of 175. He died content and full of years. He's buried beside Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from Abraham's life is that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting and moving forward even when the path isn't clear. Abraham made mistakes. He had doubts, but he always returned to his trust in God's promises. In our modern world, full of uncertainties and challenges, Abraham's story still resonates. It reminds us that great journeys often begin with a single step of faith, that sometimes we're called to let go of what we think we know and trust that God has a better plan, that His plan is to give us a future and a hope. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, Abraham's unwavering faith offers a beacon of hope and a challenge to trust in something greater than ourselves. Jesus says, "Without me, ye can do nothing." As we face our own tests and trials, may we find inspiration in this patriarch who dared to believe in the impossible and, in doing so, changed the course of history. As we reflect on Abraham's journey, what stands out? It's a story of remarkable faith, yes, but also one of very human struggles. Abraham faced family conflicts, moral dilemmas, and the challenge of trusting in promises that seemed impossible. Yet through it all, he persevered. Heavenly beings were witnesses of the scene as the faith of Abraham and the submission of Isaac were tested. The trial was far more severe than that which had been brought upon Adam. It had been difficult even for the angels to grasp the mystery of redemption, to comprehend that the commander of heaven, the Son of God, must die for guilty man, and when the Father's hand was stayed as he was about to slay his son, and the ram which God had provided was offered in the place of Isaac, then light was shed upon the mystery of redemption, and even the angels understood more clearly the wonderful provision that God had made for man's salvation.